Alright everybody, welcome back, and welcome to the second lowest vehicle in battle rating that has a radar missile. That of course is the F3H. This vehicle just went down to a battle rating of 9.0 with the recent BR changes and is one of the most highly requested vehicles that I have seen recently. It's pretty silly having radar missiles this BR, but trust me, it's not as broken as many of y'all might think. In fact, these missiles are, in my opinion, the worst missiles in War Thunder. There's a few things that make these things absolutely abysmal, but the biggest is the fact that it's just incredibly slow. It has the smallest delta V, and if you don't know what that means, it's basically just the change in speed or the acceleration of any air-to-air missile in War Thunder. Even the lowly AIM-9B and the heavier AIM-9B that the Germans made have better acceleration than this thing does. That speed is extremely important because without it, well, the missile can't turn. It doesn't have enough air going over the wings. And getting onto the turn, well, that's where the next problem comes in. So looking at the stat card, it is a quote-unquote 15G missile. And for 9.0, that doesn't seem that bad. The thing is, 15Gs doesn't actually tell the entire story. And there's a few things that go into this, but basically, 15Gs is the maximum limit on how hard the missile is allowed to pull. There's no guarantee that the missile will actually hit 15 Gs. The biggest thing when it comes to making sure that it actually does is of course both the speed of the missile and thus the airflow over the fins and how much force the fins are actually able to exert. That is why this low speed is so problematic, and then you get to the fact that this also has a limiter on how hard it can turn for up to the first 4.5 seconds of flight. The AIM-7C, like pretty much every other radar missile, has a time to gain table, and what this does is tell the missile how long it takes before the missile is allowed to pull a specific amount of Gs. For example, the AIM-7C has to fly straight for a whopping 2 seconds before it can even begin to turn. And by the way, during those 2 seconds is the only time that the missile's motor is actually burning. It burns for 2.04 seconds. So by the time the missile is even beginning to start somewhat maneuvering, the anemic motor has already burned out. And then for the next half a second, it ramps from 0% of its pull up to 40%. So that means at 2.5 seconds post-launch, it can pull a whopping 6 Gs. It takes up until 4.5 seconds before the missile actually gets its full 100% or 15 Gs of pull. And by that point, in almost all cases, the missile is going to have lost the majority of its speed at normal altitudes. Now, if you're going after a space climber, for example, who is up at 10 or 11 kilometers, then it'd probably have a much better chance because at those altitudes, the missiles can hold on to their speed for a much longer time because the drag is much lower at those altitudes. But as you can probably see from everything I've said so far, this missile has incredibly low usability in air, just purely because, well, it relies on a target essentially flying at you for an extended period of time without doing any evasive maneuver, because basically any kind of turn or roll performed by like an actual fighter is going to easily dodge this missile. Like, look, it just misses. Combine that with the fact that the Demon, while having a good radar for the battle rating, will sometimes struggle to get a lock at lower altitudes, and you can see where just running 4 AIM-9Bs would be a much better option. The missiles are faster to get at the target, are overall more agile than the Sparrow, and of course they are fire and forget. You don't have to worry about guiding it in. The AIM-7C, now that it's at 9.0, is really good at killing Tu-4s, but the problem is I only saw like 1 or 2 Tu-4s whenever I was in these games, and every time they were on my team. So unfortunately I didn't get the pleasure of shooting down a Tu-4 for y'all. So going past the radar missiles, because this isn't just a missile bus, the F3H is a decent plane for 9.0. The flight performance leaves a little bit to be desired from my experience. The biggest thing is that, well, it bleeds a lot of speed whenever you're turning. You've probably noticed in the background, but this thing can pull a lot of AOA, and it can pull pretty hard. It's just whenever you do that, you wind up bleeding most of your airspeed. You do, of course, have an afterburning engine, and your thrust to weight is better than like the MiG-17s and stuff like that, so you can use that a bit to your advantage, especially when it comes to trying to outclimb a lot of these subsonics that you find yourself facing. But against other supersonics, and even at your own battle rating at 9.0, something like the F4D, for example, has much better thrust to weight ratio than you and will also outturn you as well. Those subsonics that I mentioned that you'll see pretty often are also going to outturn you, and most of them will simply be able to out-energy you. It's fairly simple for someone like a MiG, for example, to pull you into a sustained dogfight. And, well, if they manage to do that, then you're almost certainly going to bleed all your speed. Your engine will not be able to make up for that. And then you'll just get shot down. I wouldn't say you necessarily need to avoid dogfights in this, as it is a fairly agile aircraft. But I would make sure that if you are going to be committing to a dogfight, this is not something that you're going to want to try and, say, for example, 2 or 3v1 in. It simply does not have that kind of energy or attention that you need out of a vehicle which is going to be clutching. You want to abuse that initial, high AOA, high turn, get your shots off, kill the dude, and then immediately try and get your speed back. And speaking of shots, that's one of the really nice things about this plane are the guns. It has 4 Colts, and these are pretty solid guns to the battle rating. They have good velocity and decent damage. The big thing for me is that unlike the Skyray, for example, they are all positioned close together in the nose, which means that you actually pack a really nice punch whenever you're shooting people. You also have a good amount of ammo as well, which means that you don't really have to worry too much about taking shots that aren't going to connect. I can't remember one time I ran out of ammo while making this video. Another really nice thing about it dropping from 9.3 down to 9.0 is that, of course, that means its Matchmaker changed, and 9.0 has had a very favorable Matchmaker for a while now. You may remember that I used to absolutely adore playing the Dutch Hunter, which unfortunately did get moved up to, 9.3 now, so it's no reason to play it at all anymore. But yeah, now that the Demon is at 9.0, that means it gets that same favorable 9.0 Matchmaker. And so that means that even though you don't always get, full down tiers to 8.0, most of my games were 8.3, 9.3 games, and a 0.3 up tier is very doable. You, of course, still have planes which are better than you, both at your BR and above. Like, say, for example, the F4D, I would say, is definitely better than this thing. The CL-13 Mark VI is also at 9.0. But those are both relatively rare, and the bane of your existence, the F104A, at least for the past couple updates, has actually been nerfed, which of course I made a video on earlier in this update. So pretty much everything you see now you'll actually have a reasonable chance of being able to fight, especially whenever player skill differences are accounted for. Now, I did want to give y'all a little bit of a heads up. I am getting all 4 of my wisdom teeth out this coming week, so I'm not 100% sure what my upload schedule is going to be like. I will give y'all more details whenever it gets closer, but hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It means a lot to me, and I'll catch y'all next time. So peace, and enjoy this ME-163 from World War II getting hit by a Sparrow.